stars.
I want to see it.
Amazing.
Oh man,
It is like the single best season of television that anybody can jump
It
into.
has Green Arrow, right? It has the arrow.
I've shown it to
Oh,
5 different people, and they have all gone nuts for it. And it has one of the most joyful moments I've ever seen on film, which is basically this main character that they kind of build up through the show. You never know if they're really going to make it. And at the very last scene, there's this big deal about who's going to get the belt. And this character, who nobody sees coming, is going to get the belt, because if they don't, this competing wrestling organization is going to basically foobar their entire event. And this is like in front of like 15,000 people. So this person has to do a suplex, and they start this body slam suplex that's just amazing. And there's this just vision of joy on their face. Like literally, it's like angelic. There's like light on their face, like, oh, and then bam, and then they're able to get the belt. And I was like, if this is the end of the show, it's perfect. And unfortunately, they got picked up for a second season, so I can't wait for it. Yeah, it's awesome.
I know 3 or 4 actual wrestlers who are extras on that show.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's very cool.
And they filmed part of it. They filmed part of it here in our Dragon Con hotel too.
Yes, they do.
Oh yeah! Oh wow! Yeah.
Is it Marriott?
Yeah, well, Amel is a huge fan of Dragon Con in Atlanta. He basically fell in love with it because he came to Dragon Con. So when he got obsessed with wrestling, he was like, let's do it in Georgia. So it's pretty cool.
So what we're saying is,
he's Canadian originally, though, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, he is.
So,
Yes, he is.
So he's got the Canadian stuff going on, and
I have to know all of them.
You do have to know all of them. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, 2 minutes into it, and we haven't even started doing our topic yet. Welcome.
Normal.
It's 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Time, the only time zone that matters. Who in the crap knows what time it is in Canada with Deanna?
9.
Well, I guess, Deanna, you know what time it is.
9, same time zone. 9.
9:06.
Time zones run up and down, Joe.
Yes, they're vertical. They're not horizontal.
They're based on longitude.
Canada is on our continent, Joe.
What? Okay.
She's right above us.
Here is
Your
what
hat.
we're doing. Tonight, you are watching the American Sci-Fi Classics Track quarantine panels. Tonight, we're talking about our favorite franchises as a whole entity. Gary Mitchell, who is absent tonight because we got a full house, much like the sitcom. I'm Uncle Joey, of course. Or am I one of the twins? I don't know. Am I one of the twins? Here's the thing. What we're doing is, the way I interpreted the title, which Gary invented, the topic, which Gary invented was, which franchise as a whole entity is your favorite? And it doesn't have to be, I guess a franchise technically is more than 2 things, but I guess it could be as small as 2 things. Yeah. So that means that, unfortunately, Manimal and Sequest are out.
I thought it was just movies. I have to redo my list.
Movies,
Yeah,
It is just movies. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
just
Oh,
movies.
well,
Very
that's
clarified.
It's definitely out because it's always out, Joe. Okay. Until you know what? Someday NBC is going to say we're going to remake Manimal, and Joe is going to be on set with like just whatever you need. You need coffee? I got coffee. I cannot wait for the Manimal.
I got everything.
It will happen, people. It will happen.
Yeah.
He'll finance it with his wrestling fees. That's why he's been doing this wrestling the whole time.
That'll be more than the original budget of Manimal, so
I bet it will be.
It'll be a better show.
It will be intrinsically a better show. However, it has to have the same exact intro from the original from the 80s.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
You can't change a single frame. You can't change a single frame. It has to be that exact intro.
That is the best part. And now our actual topic. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 people in the house, 5 people who you have seen on the quarantine panels more or less before. Some of our favorite people you guys have made.
We won't tell you which are not our favorite.
No, we will not tell you. Some of these people are our favorite people. But we are so excited for you guys to come and hang out with us again. We love doing these things. Hopefully this gives you an hour or 2, depending on how long we go, and of a little break from the hot ass garbage that generally is existence in these last couple of years. But here's what we're doing. We'll go around and we'll talk about our favorite franchises. So let's start reverse alphabetically by last name, which means Shaun. No, it's Deanna. Never mind.
Yeah, Deanna.
Yeah. Reason why I played French horn in junior high school was because I was at the back of the alphabet and it was the only thing left.
I'm an S, so I get it. I'm an S. My birth name, anyways.
Okay, so
ST. Thank you.
Before we jump in like full scale here,
do it.
What are we defining as a franchise? Because this is when we were talking about best movie franchises versus favorites. I was thinking to myself, like, if we're talking franchises, then all of Star Wars counts. Which
correct.
Solo.
But it's I think we're
but
talking...
then that also means that The Hobbit counts when we're talking Lord of the Rings, right?
The Russian version?
Huh?
What?
The Russian version?
Sherman. Stop. Deanna.
So what, like, are we allowed to be as narrow as we want? Because that may change people's answers, right?
I mean, do you want to be here 3.5 hours?
Like
or
the prequels,
1 hour?
Like
Okay.
the prequels.
All right,
versus...
so I'll go first, and I'm gonna go with the MCU. That was the one I kind of, when I sat back and I thought, what has been the most impactful really would be the MCU. Because if you had told any of us when Iron Man came out that we would get 10 years of movies like Black Panther, Civil War, Winter Soldier, just stop and think about that movie. And we'd get Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, and we'd get to see like the superhero fight in Civil War and that big fight at the end of Endgame that is epic on a level that blows your mind. None of us would have believed that. Like, that was a shot in the dark that Marvel took, and they have created a series of movies that for the most part are pretty good. When Thor the Dark World is the lowest bar on your ladder, you've done well, because a lot of other franchises, especially that last that long, can't say that at all. So that's my sort of entry here. And it turned a DC girl into somebody who's now has gone back and read all the Marvel stuff. Like, I've gone back and gotten stuff and read and learned my Marvel lore, right? And as other people are mentioning in the chats, and plus the TV shows, like, okay, yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is spotty at times, and we don't talk about the Inhumans. But
no, we do not talk about the Inhumans. The fact that you brought them up is offensive.
That's a whole other pound.
Oh my god,
that's not part of what we're supposed
whole
to be
other
talking
pound.
about.
Oh no!
But wow, wow. So there you go.
Okay. Let's see. Continuing in reverse alphabetical order. Although she tried to fool me with her last name, her given
my Muggle name.
Yes, your Muggle name is what we'll go by, Miss Lola Strickland. Now it's your turn.
All right. Well, I made a list. I've got a ton, but if we're talking about these,
go first. I mean, we'll have time to go
We've
around.
We've got 3 hours. We're gonna be here all night. So yeah, I need to pace myself. Like when I'm drinking, though I never do. Speaking of which, I have eggnog with rum. All right. So the most defining championship of all time is. Am I doing a good wrestling voice? For, I forgot where I was. Franchises for film is Star Trek.
Okay.
Y'all just kind of look like, okay.
Well, I just pretend the odd ones don't exist. So that's how.
This is overall.
Your mileage will vary.
I mean, honest to God, I could pretty much take every Star Trek movie except for Insurrection. Like, I can't. I have watched that movie 7 times, but I have never been able to get through it without falling asleep. So I've seen it 7 times in parts. I know the plot of the movie. I've seen
I'm the same way, except
No, go ahead, Bobby.
Go ahead, Bobby.
I'm the same way, except the one I can't take is Into Darkness. I can handle all the rest of them.
Yeah.
Into
Again,
Darkness.
I am amazed at your ability to handle 5. I've
It's
seen that
grown on me.
once.
Well, for the longest time, 5 was the worst. Then they kept making more.
Then they lowered the bar.
Yeah. But I mean, the
They
Final
said,
Frontier.
well, we hit bottom. Let's keep digging.
Yeah, but the Final Frontier has grown on me over the years because the Final Frontier has a lot of really great character interactions. The plot is complete garbage. I really don't like the plot, but I really love how the characters interact with each other. Like, there's a joy there that I really that I just get into. Yes, they made Scotty seem a bit ridiculous because he didn't know his way around the Enterprise and bangs his head and knocks himself out. Okay, let's not focus on that. But you get like that wonderful scene with Spock and Bones and Kirk, and they're all basically around the campfire and stuff. You get Uhura just getting like all flirty with Scotty. Everybody has like a really kind of cool moment, and you have probably two of my favorite scenes in any Star Trek film, which is you see Spock's like original sin of being born and crying at birth, and his dad's like, he's human. And he's just like, he's holding him out like, ooh. And then, of course, you have Bones's, just terrible tragedy of, he basically let his father die. And then like 12 months later, they discovered a cure for the thing that his father was suffering from. That's messed up, but I mean, those are two really powerful scenes. And I'm like, I love those scenes. And that's also in the most ridiculous Star Trek movie outside of Insurrection, which again is a piece of crap and should not be viewed. There is no Insurrection. You just go from First Contact to Nemesis.
Yeah.
Well, and see, in my mind, it's really just the first movie, Wrath of Khan, and the Dolphin one. And they're so great. That's all we need. That's all we need. I don't really know.
The thing is,
the Country is brilliant. It's absolutely. I hold that 6 is actually the best of the original.
6 is the best
series ones.
Yeah,
just with the whole premise of taking the concept of the end of a Cold War and putting it into a space-time, so that it's really about the Americans and the Russians and how do Cold Warriors stop being Cold Warriors. Yeah. But it's about Starfleet and the Klingons because we can't have an American, which Kirk is like a representation of that.
Even though he's Canadian,
we can't have him say, yeah. Well, I don't know. No,
I know.
That's
it's
another
okay.
podcast.
It's okay.
Anywho, but to have Kirk say, "Let them die," about the Klingons, you couldn't have Rambo say that. You couldn't have John Wayne say that in any of his movies, but Captain Kirk saying it, all of a sudden we're exploring really interesting ideas.
It puts it into perspective.
Yeah, Rebels now are ended, Kirk.
Yes, and then you also get Christopher Plummer chewing on every piece of scenery in
Canadian
that,
also.
Possibly also on
it's
Shatner.
just so good.
Not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you finally get Sulu in the. Yeah, but you also finally get Sulu. He finally has his own freaking starship, right? He's like everything like that. He's finally a captain and whatnot. Right, that's like one of the best moments, right? Where it's like, if we fly any faster, she'll fly apart. Fly her apart, then, and you're like, I'm gonna go faster. Like, I'm gonna get out and push. It was so great. I loved it.
It mixed nicely with Voyager too.
Absolutely, yeah.
But here's the thing. I think what in my mind when I think of franchise stuff, Star Trek was, as far as sci-fi stuff goes, Star Trek was the first one.
Yeah.
Well,
not if you're talking movies. If you're talking TV shows, it's
We got
Star Trek because of Star Wars, right? So
that's true.
I think
Star Trek was
in my mind. This is what's weird in my mind.
Oh, the movies. I see the movies.
I still think of somehow, even though the Star Trek movie, correctly, as you said, came after the Star Wars story, and probably because of the Star Wars movie, I kind of think of it as part of the original series. Like, it still continues in that vein, and that's, for our purposes, not technically what we're talking about if we're just talking movie franchises. But as far as over the holidays, binge watching things, for example, Deanna's choice with the MCU, except for the one thing with the Dark World, and you can get through it. Come on. It's still got Thor in it.
Are you serious? Malekith's old Icelandic is awesome. It's awesome.
Look, the Dark Elves are an amazing design. They are completely wasted in that movie. Like, we should have had like 5 movies of Dark Elves, man.
And
they're so cool
And
looking.
if you pay close attention, a lot of the Dark Elves are and some of the Frost Giants, I think, are like Travis Willingham. So there's like motion capture guys that are used
cool.
in the background of some of those. So if you pay attention and you know your motion capture guys, you can be like, oh, look, there's Travis.
But the thing is, as like you can do that. You can go consecutive. You can just binge a whole thing of MCU. With Star Trek, if you start it, you got to take a break after the second one.
It's you.
Wrecked emotionally.
Come back for the 4th one, the 5th one, and then it kind of peters out.
But then you get stoned for the Nephrim. What's James Cromwell's character? The guy who
Cochran?
Yeah, for Cochran. Yeah, you get stoned for that whole thing, and then you kind of refresh after that and start over.
Woodyard's in that movie too. Like,
oh yeah, Alfred Woodard's awesome in that.
Like, you're getting some high quality actors.
We don't prescribe drugs here. We just recommend them, ladies and gentlemen.
We don't prescribe them. We go to doctors for that.
Let's see. Boom, boom. Reverse alphabetical order. It is Shaun. Thank you for checking me.
Yep. I was actually thinking about this, and when we were talking about this, I was thinking of classics. So I was thinking 2001 and earlier. And when I think of like perfect movie franchises, like my favorite perfect movie franchise, where in my opinion there's not a sour note in the bunch, it's Back to the Future. From beginning to end, it's Back to the Future. You start off with what is possibly one of the greatest like scripts of all time. I mean, literally, they teach this script at UCLA as one of the best scripts to ever work from. It is considered one of the highest. They literally put it on the same level as Citizen Kane as far as like everything that they put in this movie is paid off. It is a wonderfully well-rounded, just amazing film. Back to the Future 2, slightly diminished returns, but still a very fun movie, and also has one of the great moments where Carl Sagan said, this to me is probably the most accurate version of why going back in time is dangerous. Because he's like, you have to avoid yourself, and then if you screw up something in the past, then it's going to screw up your future and all that jazz. And then you finish with Back to the Future 3, which personally is my favorite because it's also a Western. And I love Marty and Doc in the Wild West. And
it has ZZ Top.
Yeah, you got ZZ Top, but also that's the moment where Tom Wilson goes from being one of the great heels of all time to just being one of the great actors of the 80s. And he does not get enough credit. His ability to go from Biff Tannen to Biff Tannen to Biff Tannen, and then he does this Buford Tannen. I was an adult before I realized that was the same dude because he had morphed so much. And then I realized there are so many other roles I've seen him in. And I'm like, Tom Wilson is like a chameleon, and just like that man is a treasure, and people do not pay him enough respect. But Back to the Future, like that for me, and it's also the perfect length. You could basically watch it in an afternoon. It's like 6 hours long. And boom, boom, you're done. And you get to that last scene where the train lifts up and says, okay, we've just jumped over the shark. They're like, credits, we're done. That's all you need.
The thing is, about Back to the Future for me is we've gotten at Dragon Con on the Classics Track a couple of, I guess just Christopher Lloyd is who we've had, but I feel like Biff, we could spend a whole weekend and not touch all the stuff that he has done. And I'm hoping one day we drag Biff to Dragon Con, and I kind of feel bad for not saying his real name because it's left my mind, even
Tom
though
Wilson?
you literally just said it. Thank you.
Tom Wilson, You know, and I mean, but seriously, I mean, you got Christopher Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, Tom Wilson. You have Crispin Glover, Crispin, right?
Yeah.
Crispin Glover. Yeah, okay. I was like, that's his name. Leah Thompson. I mean, there are so many great movies, and I can never remember the actor's name, but the guy who plays the principal. You're a slacker. I love that guy.
Oh yeah,
that guy. Also, by the way, by proxy of that, I imagine that's the same character who then goes into He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and then retires on Eternia. So he retired from being a school teacher, then he becomes a detective.
Yes.
So that is
canon.
tangentially part of the canon.
I'll allow
of the future. So
I'll 100% allow it. And as far as
the character's name was Strickland. I'm sorry, I just remembered that. Yeah.
That is an ancestor of Lola's, I believe. Nice. The thing is with Back to the Future, it, like you were saying, it's still good. There were only 3. There should have been 7 more, I think, but that's fine. 3 is fine.
But also, as we talked about this with other shows too,
go ahead.
When we get into franchises too, after 3, you start getting into that diminishing returns.
Right.
Really, in most cases, you really after 3, it starts going downhill pretty quick. There
It
are
can get dangerous. You're right. Yeah.
Well, and there are some that don't even make it. Like you get your diminishing return at number 2,
Right?
Like, where you're like, what? No, like this. We didn't need this. We were good.
Right, like 2 Terminators was good. After that, it kind of goes
Matrix,
off a cliff.
I would argue Matrix after 1. The first one was.
But speaking of, we'll get to you, Sherman, and your Breaking franchise.
Hey, Cannon needed money, okay?
You
gotta
do it
the
now.
sex. It was there.
But Bobby Nash, Mr. Bobby, award-winning Bobby Nash, tell us your first pick.
I actually went, like Shaun, I went thinking classics, so I went back. Plus, I figured somebody would beat me to Star Trek, so
sure.
I was thinking the original Planet of the Apes movies.
Ooh, that's a good choice.
They are classics,
Yes, and and yes, even though there is a bit of a drop off, if you watch all 5, it's still one big story. I think they tell it well, and I mean, there's no denying just how good, especially that first one is.
Yeah,
and it's just a wonderful series of movies where, too, as an audience member, you kept thinking, okay, we end the second one by blowing up the Earth. What are we going to do? How are they going to do a sequel to that? But they managed to pull it off with
a figured it out
/prequel. Yeah. And make it work and make it all tie together, which I thought was really interesting.
And Bobby,
and that's also a series that's.
Oh, go ahead, Bobby. I'm sorry.
What was that? I was gonna say,
no,
and plus it's a franchise that they've rebooted twice now. And on the second, even as good as the second ones are, to me, they've missed something that's in the original series of movies with the new ones. And not that they're not bad, they're good. I enjoy the new ones, but there's, I don't know, there's more of it feels more like a classic sci-fi on those original ones.
The original ones, it was kind of audacious, I think, because most monster flicks up until that point, most sci-fi flicks, you got the one guy in a suit at some point in the movie, or the one special effect. In this movie, there's only more or less one human. Everybody is a special effect.
Right.
In this movie, everybody is made up. Everybody is in costume, and that made it super different and bonkers.
Yeah.
More so.
And they made wait for it. I mean, we are well into the movie before we see the first ape.
Oh yeah, it's like 30. I think it's like
us.
25, 30 minutes into the movie when you finally see them on those horses. That's the only problem with that film, as far as like if you were like going back to the 60s and you're watching it the first time. Imagine not knowing the title of that movie, and you walk in and you're just thinking you're watching into a sci-fi film, and then you see a freaking ape on a horse. You're going to plots in the 60s, but they literally show them on the cover, on the poster. So they kind of give away that one.
Well, it's also called Planet of the Apes,
Right.
If you didn't know.
Right, but I mean, that's the only detractor you could give. I mean, like, seriously, Joe, you were talking about being audacious. I mean, the first Planet of the Apes has just the brass stones to say, here's a classic sci-fi film that now has become a survivalist post-apocalyptic film. And then you get all the way to the end, you go, oh, by the way, they're on Earth. And then they just drop credits on you. Yeah. It's like, what the hell was that? And so part 2 is for me the worst of like the first 4, because I really feel like we're just treading over old ground until that last like half hour. But that last half hour, they're like, we're bringing up the mic, and then they just drop that mic on you again because they blow up the freaking Earth. And you're just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
My dad showed me these like on a weekend. It was like a Labor Day weekend. It was on like TNT or something. Way back in the early days. And I remember like freaking out. I was like, what happened to Earth? He's like, yeah, it's dead. And I'm like, what do you mean it's dead? He's like, yeah, Earth is gone. Yeah. And I was like, so what's the next movie? He's like, you'll see. And then boom, you're in the 70s. And honestly, part 3 really, brings the quality back up. I mean, I really enjoyed seeing futuristic apes in modern times. Now it's like a time capsule of the 70s, which is even more interesting to kind of go through and see.
Well, also, I think, certainly, I mean, Roddy McDowall, he owns it.
So good.
Yep.
But I think teaming him up with Ricardo Montalban,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a team that worked. And I think that the caliber of those actors really helped sell that third one.
It really does. I mean, there is a fantastic level of, okay, we now have our best actors in arguably the best version of that makeup that they're going to have. And because all their special effects budget only has to go essentially into 3 apes, So what was it 4?
There were 3.
It was 3.
Well,
there
were 4. 1 dies.
Well, right. But 3 adults and then the baby, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
So you basically only focus on 3 adults, and you're just like crushing it with these actors who are able to just completely manipulate, essentially just this big chunky latex face. And I mean, they're amazing. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. And then you go into 4, and I'm torn on 4 because I love the "we will find a way to make peace" ending. But if you've ever seen the original cut, where basically Caesar's like kill them all, it's dark, but it's.
I did not know, Shaun. I did not know that other cut existed until I was on a panel about that movie with Gary and Andrew Gasca, who is a buddy of ours who has written Planet of the Apes, and he's been in charge of the franchise's continuity for a while, I believe, but are managing the continuity, but for 20th Century Fox. But anyway, he reveals the other ending, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And then I YouTubed it right after the panel. It's like, whoa, there in front of the whole room. I had no idea.
Yeah, and for those who don't know about this,
go ahead.
Caesar basically at the end of the original movie, the quote unquote the theatrical release, Caesar looks, because it's all a metaphor about basically keeping people of color down and kind of this white supremacy metaphor. And so he looks at the black main lead and he realizes we can't go down this or we're not going to be any better than the people who've kept us oppressed. So he's like, we're going to find a way to make this work. We're going to find peace. And so that's the original ending. Or that's the ending that we see. But the original ending, he basically looks at the guy and he's like, kill them all. And they just start braining people. Like they just start pulling up the rifles and they just start braining people. And it's just, you're like, holy crap. And it ends with like half the human population being killed because the apes want to keep them as pets, or those who help them escape are kind of like the honored humans. They're kind of kept in a place of honor, but otherwise they're wiped out or they're kept as cattle. And it's a dark ending. And it's pretty impressive, quite frankly, that they went for that, because this was 1975 or something.
70, something like that.
Like that, yeah.
That is an intensely dark scene. But considering the decade, there was a lot of really dark turns in the middle of the decade. So yeah. So I mean, it makes sense for the time, but I mean, it really is a wonderful piece of storytelling. And if you ever get a chance to get that Blu-ray set, you can watch either ending. But be prepared. That's that original ending it's intense.
It's a little bleak. It's a
little dark. Yeah, it's a little dark. But then you get to 5, and 5 is it's nice they didn't blow up the Earth the second time. Right? I mean,
it's the nicest thing you can say about a movie.
Yeah, it's nice that they didn't blow up the Earth.
Yeah. Oh man,
makes Thor: The Dark World look better and better, doesn't it?
Yes, by comparison, Conquest makes Thor: The Dark World just man.
I think now what you got to put on as the tagline in movies is, well, they didn't blow up the Earth.
Well, like that should be like on every movie survey that they have whenever they're trying to grade it. Well, how did this compare? Did they blow up the Earth? No. Like that should just be on the survey. Yes. How can we improve this movie? You could have blown up Earth. That should be an option too.
I want to have like one of those IMDb type websites that catalogs things in movies, and it's just we'll just get didtheyblowuptheearth.com, and like 99.5% of movies, no, No, and then you get to there's one.
That just needs
No,
that scene at the end of 2 just needs to be the after credit scene of every movie that comes out next year. Movie ends,
pushing the
blow up
button.
here. Yeah.
Oh my god! You get to the end of Endgame, right? And like they beat Thanos and everything's good, and then just flash forward, and the Earth became a cinder, and humanity was forgotten. It's just like, oh my god!
All right.
Good news.
Tom Hanks.
Pulluptheearth.com is available.
Excellent. Thank you.
Get on that.
Tom Hanks meets Meg Ryan at the top of the Empire State Building, and then Charlton Heston hits the button.
There's a metaphor there about sex, but that's not this particular.
Homeward bound. The dogs finally get home, and Charles Heston just hits his hand on the damn.
Charlotte dies, but the little spiders float on, and then.
We're free. Not anymore.
Better than Mac and Me on Conan.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it really would be.
Will Ferrell helps Santa save Christmas, right? They get to fly out of New York, and they get like his dad to sing, and then Charlton Heston just.
Die Hard would have a completely different ending if you think about it. You know,
actually, yeah.
Plane saved everybody, and
Charlton Heston just.
Freaking
you all to hell.
So anyway, now that we've ruined every movie, what's your?
I'm gonna need a minute. I'm gonna mute myself.
Sherman, go.
Okay, for me, I was primed for this by Star Trek because I literally cannot remember when I first started watching Star Trek. But for me, it would have to be the Star Wars franchise.
Sure.
I fell in love with R2-D2 and C-3PO much more so than the humans in the movie. I don't know what that says about me or about the movies, but there you go.
Well, they were, if you think about that, they were our introductory characters. We spend more time with R2 and 3PO at the beginning of that movie than anybody else.
Quite a bit of time. There's like 20 minutes,
really
I think.
Sort of the everyman characters, because even though when we watch the prequels, we learn that they're much more important. At that point, like Luke has powers, Leia's a princess, Han has like a kick butt ship and a big walking carpet as a friend. Like they're all superpowered guys. R2 and 3PO are bumbling. They argue with each other the way you fought with your brother and sister. I used to call them the old gay married couple of sci-fi because that's what they were, and so they really are our everyman characters for the beginning of that movie and for that franchise.
Right, and they were our eyes and ears too, because the way they explain things tells us things as the audience that everybody else in the world knew. So yeah,
there's a theory. All right. Yeah. So one time I was talking to my ex about Star Wars, and I'm trying to remember what got us started about it.
It doesn't matter.
I don't remember, but I said something about it being a long time ago, and he said, no, it's current time. And I was like, you've lost your damn mind. What the hell? Get out of my face. Go away. He said, no, you don't understand. This is all being told from R2-D2's perspective. He lived throughout time, and this is him like recounting it to someone. And I was like, go home. And he was like, no, I've heard that theory. He said, people have said that. And I'm like, I don't like it. But anyways, that's a theory.
Well, even your dog didn't like that theory. Your dog hates that theory.
No. There was an entire page linked that showed that R2-D2 was the central character of all of the Star Wars movies.
Right.
Right. Because I remember around the time after after Return of the Jedi came out, there was a lot of talk about that these movies were all being told later on, were being told by 3PO and R2.
Yeah, that's
because if you think about it, there's never a scene where they're not there. Like when the characters split off and Luke goes to Dagobah and Han and Leia, they go off over here. One of the droids is with each group. So all of the stories that are going on, they're around all the
In
various
that, yeah, in
characters.
the original trilogy, you would be right.
Yeah.
Like I'm going through my brain right now, like yeah, no.
Right. But there is one tiny hole in that, which is when 3PO gets the ever living shit blown out of him on Bespin, and he's not there for a good half hour because he's a pile of parts in the corner.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
Because
that
there'd be
was-
some
that was the part
some
Chewbacca filled
background
in
power.
on, fill him in on.
And
Right,
Luke-
right. I mean, you
Luke
can
in the
argue
ice
that.
cave, right? But
right, and
but
there
it's
was nobody
still-
in the ice cave, right?
yeah, but there's still like there's a lot of that movie that they were part, like a lot of that trilogy that they were part of, and you could spin that quite easily because the very few moments that they weren't there for, they would have been there for the retelling of that. So as
Right.
Luke's Luke's recovering in after the Bacta tank, R2 is there when he's having a conversation, and 3PO when he's explaining what happened, and when 3PO gets turned back on by Chewie explains to 3PO what the heck's happening, right? So I could see how that theory would actually work.
Yeah,
And I mean,
always
if
just
we're
thought it
going
was
to
more
talk
of a-
about if we're going to talk about Star Wars, we also just like, I mean, the reason why we're all like many of us are geeks is because of that in part. If you think about the impact culturally of that, because Shaun, you were talking about how dark the 70s were, and then you get a movie like Star Wars showing up which is basically a very happy tale at the end. Like when you get to the end of the first movie, they beat the bad guys, they blow up the Death Star, yay! And it's such a tonal shift from what else was coming out in the 70s. That's one of the reasons why it was so popular, is that it was this hope. There was this, and that's the subtitle of it, A New Hope.
Yes.
Is there's hope in this, and oh my God, it's gonna be okay. And that's one of its cultural impact, and that leads us also, you can talk about the blockbuster, you can talk about the merchandising. It kind of leads us into what is our modern culture around movies.
It made a
it
gigantic
starts right
cultural
there.
splash. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was a lot of sci-fi movies my parents would not let me watch growing up in the 70s. Because it was very dark. And
Seriously, the Andromeda Strain, the Omega Man.
Yeah.
I mean, dear Lord.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah,
like
there's a lot.
Soylent Green, Logan.
A lot of Chuck Heston movies. A lot of Chuck Heston movies.
And Heston doesn't make it to the end of a lot of the movies for him to hit the button.
Yeah, well, like we were saying before, though, without Star Wars, there wouldn't have been a Star Trek movie, because Star Trek the movie was actually Star Trek 2, well, Star Trek the next phase.
2.0, right, yeah.
A television show that Roddenberry was developing. And, I mean, we got Star Trek, Buck Rogers, even Battlestar Galactica. Even Manimal is one of the ripples from that initial Star Wars splash.
Sure. Oh, yeah, because it made sci-fi cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again. It made this fun adventure cool.
It made it profitable.
Yes.
It made it incredibly profitable.
Yeah, because you can argue that
kids.
Yeah, because you can argue that Star Trek kind of made, sci-fi, kind of cool. They weren't taking it to be cheesy. They were trying to treat it as seriously as possible, probably
accessible at least.
and try to make it as accessible, at least to the degree not seen since Rod Serling during the Twilight Zone, right?
But you have to think, though, there's a decade between that, though.
But that's the thing, though, is that they couldn't make it profitable. They only did, 2 seasons or 3 seasons, and they got canceled. They come back for the 4th season. So they're struggling the whole time just trying to stay on the air. So then a decade ahead, here comes Star Wars, which admittedly is more sci-fantasy than sci-fi, but that's okay. They learn how to unlock that code and make everybody happy, which just makes everything blow up. And, when you were growing up during this time, whether or not you were a teenager or a kid like me, this heavily affected how you viewed pop culture. Being a geek and loving Star Wars was like where you wanted to be. And it took another 30 years for the rest of the world to catch up with us, because we're like, this is where it's at.
Well, I will fully admit to there being movies and television shows that I wouldn't watch because they didn't have enough lasers or robots in them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like that now.
I was 12 before I realized that the 20th Century Fox music didn't always mean Star Wars. I thought that was part of the Star Wars, and I'd come running, and I'd be bitterly disappointed when it was
Kramer versus Kramer.
What?
Done.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, I'm a little mad that Fox, now that Fox is under the Disney banner, that they haven't restored the Fox intro to
Mhm.
all of the Star Wars movies. Like, I want it even on like the sequel series. If there's not Fox fanfare, I feel a little let down because I need it right before they kick into the damn Star Wars credits. Like, I want it
Yeah.
there, and when it's not, it makes me a little sad panda. So,
Yeah. Well, and Star Wars too. Star Wars made this type of movie became more accessible to people that didn't like sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Kind of like what we do with the kind of like what we get today with the MCU movies.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I talk to people all the time that don't like those kind of movies in general, but have fallen in love with the MCU movies because they're so accessible. And I
Joe,
think
when-
Star Wars did that for a lot of them.
I'm sorry, we're reading the comments, Bobby. We're not laughing at you, buddy. I'm
I
sorry.
gotta
We're-
share Billy's comment because that's
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm sorry. That was just too good.
It's true.
Billy's a smart ass. But no, I know Billy. Billy's good peeps. But Billy's not wrong.
Billy is-
I mean, if Manimal had more
You know.
lasers, I'd have been more inclined to watch more of it. So
Mhm.
You know what? That's a T-shirt, Joe. I think you can put that on a T-shirt.
you should.
But-
That should be the
That's a
American
t-shirt.
Sci-Fi Classic t-shirt for next year.
Yeah, you
Manimal
should
would have gotten
go-
6 seasons had lasers been involved.
Oh, I do expect to see a banner in the room of Charlton Heston pushing a button
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
because that's what we're going to end every
we should
panel.
have that clip. Every panel, that clip should be queued up, and then you just hit the button, and it just.
Boom.
The world
Time's up.
without bird cinder and humanity is dead.
Like that. Just that's how
I
every,
love it.
Every panel. Got
every
it.
panel. That's all it is.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, this is great. We've already got. Look, we're still 10 months away, and we've already got the end of every panel done.
Yes, you got it. And
Great.
nobody's going to get that joke except for the folks who watch this episode.
Nope.
Welcome, America.
Yes. You're welcome,
but you know what's
everyone
funny?
who watches this one.
So here's a funny story, though, right? So, but if we're thinking about all these movies, Star Trek ends with Chuck Heston blowing them all up. Star Wars doesn't happen because Star Wars happens in a galaxy far, far away. So who the hell cares that Earth gets blown up?
That's
Yeah, who cares?
So
No,
it's
but there's Tarkin blows up Alderaan and they blow up the Death Star. So
yeah.
there's about
So we need to do like a Tarkin version of the Chuck Heston scene too for Star Wars.
Although there was the Star Wars crossover, there was the Star Wars comics by Dark Horse where they had Han Solo and Chewbacca
Nope.
fly.
That is the most depressing Star Wars related thing ever.
They fly to Earth. They had a hyperspace accident. They flew to Earth and they crashed in a redwood forest in Northern California. And Chewbacca comes out and is the origin of the Sasquatch story. And Indiana Jones walks into the redwood forest in Northern California to investigate the story about the Sasquatch. That was from Dark Horse Comics.
I want to Star Wars Holiday Special that comic.
Yeah.
I want, and
A dramatic
but not in a
reading.
good way. I want to find all the copies and destroy them. That's
No.
not
Joe,
cool.
Joe is sad because it means that Sasquatch isn't real.
Thank
and
you.
No,
that's-
that means that
that's-
Sasquatch
that's
is a Wookiee. That makes it better.
Yeah.
Does it?
Yes, because Chewbacca's my favorite character out of Star Wars. Yes,
Chewbacca's
it makes
also-
it better.
I'm
And if
I think I'm
Manimal
still mad from the-
could have been a Wookiee.
I think I'm still mad because of the Star Wars novels that killed off Chewbacca.
Yeah.
But,
Oh yes,
He was also
Yeah.
Vector
Still mad.
Prime.
comics too.
Yeah,
Stay
Vector
angry.
Prime. Mm.
Yeah.
okay, but anyway, now let's go
Right.
back around to
Happiness.
back to and again, we could
Deanna.
talk for 17 hours about Star Wars, but it's not even the same track as us. I hope the Star Wars track people are having this much fun talking about that one issue
Animal.
of the Dark Horse comic. But anyway, Deanna, next up on your list.
Okay, so the next up, I'm gonna dip into animation, and I'm gonna talk about Toy Story,
Oh,
because
nice.
Toy Story, the first 3 movies at least of that series, are pretty damn perfect. And when they did the second one, I thought, well, come on, okay, you can't do a second one. It's kind of done, and they did a second one. And then they did a third one. I thought, no, stop going to the well. It was good. And the third one
Oh,
blew my mind, right? Like, just what is happening here? And, the fourth one is not as good. But
No.
but you know what? how many movie franchises have we gotten 4 movies out of that we can say that the first, the second, and the third are pretty much brilliant pieces of cinema? I mean, the first one is about, a child and really sort of that acceptance piece. And then you get the second one where it's more about sort of accepting change and that kind of thing. And the third one's about growing up and putting away, and how do you grow up and put away your childish things? But instead he gives his childish things to
Well,
the
you're
next kid.
you're asking the wrong crowd.
I know.
Yeah, it's
I
like,
know. Look at my fabric. It's got robots.
I mean, look.
But it does it in a way that's so respectful of, it's not dismissive. He's not made fun of. He's growing up and he's moving on, but he still loves these things. And that final scene when he drops off those toys with her, I mean, a toy, like in that third movie, Pixar made me sob hysterically twice, because once in the garbage compactor, because I think, oh my God, they're all going to die, and
They're going to kill them all.
They've all accepted that they're going to die, and
they just hold hands like together.
And we're not going to stop. We're stopping this. We're not fighting this anymore. We can't fight this, and then they get saved, of course, by the aliens, which is amazing.
That is a great callback to the first movie.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
is like a wonderful, perfect circle of a story.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, but then that final scene when he's driving away, but then she plays with them, right? And she plays with them, like, and so they're still going to be loved. And that, the second movie about the collector, that like about. And again, that touches our hearts, because, what is on our shelves, right? Like Shaun behind you, do you keep a toy in a box, or is a toy meant to be played with? And it's like, and it's about growing old and accepting that you can't always stay young. And then, just they're perfect pieces of cinema. And the first one's really about what happens when, like, your mom has a new kid and your parents have another child, and there's another child, and you're displaced from being the favorite, right? Yeah. They're really interesting metaphors and really well done pieces of cinema.
Okay, I'm super bummed out. Lola.
Right. It's kind of hard to pick, because I have so many franchises where I love a few of the movies, and a few of the movies are like, so it's like, but the perfection of one of the movies will kind of outshine the lackluster of some of the others.
Sure.
So I'm going to pick the original George Romero Dead movies.
Okay, it's like Gary's here. Oh, I think that might have been Gary's, but
such classics.
I feel like those movies are. Romero is kind of a singular auteur of horror, and whatever he does, there's an element of goodness, of nutso horror genius in there somewhere. There's a nugget, and but I agree. So Lola, tell us. So the very first one, Night of the Living Dead, was that the apex? Was that as good as it got, or were there peaks and valleys? I think that's what you're saying.
Well, I loved Dawn of the Dead. And wasn't there Day of the Dead too?
There was Day of the Dead, yep.
Day of the Dead. Now they started getting into like later decades. You had Land of the Dead,
Diary
of
the
Dead, and
yeah.
I remember Diary of the Dead. I was like, I actually saw that in the theater. I was like, why am I here? Why did I do this? I know. I was just like,
it's because Romero said, "Hey, I want to make another zombie movie," and you're like, "I'm here for you, George."
Yeah, exactly. Some movies, when you see George Romero is one of those guys. When you see a thing that his name is on, you go, "I'm in," no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Day movies, the Night of Living Dead movies. I think that they are. I mean, let me just say it this way: you do not have The Walking Dead, you do not have modern zombies without Romero. So that alone, Romero made what we think of zombies.
Yeah.
Even though, of course, everybody says brains, that didn't happen until The Return of the Living Dead. That actually, he's never actually had zombies eat brains. They just try to eat flesh. They just go after, you because you're warm. And I always thought that was an interesting kind of phenomenon that happened culturally. But when you look at those first three movies, they all have a commentary about something, which is, of course, what do you're not afraid of the monster in Night of the Living Dead. You're afraid of other people. Dawn of the Dead is a commentary about our consumerism. And then, of course, Day of the Dead is a commentary about our tribalism. It's us versus them. And the only problem I've ever really had with George and his particular storytelling style is that it's always from a place of, this is the problem with the world, and there's never a solution. And I don't like that. I don't like the fact that there's never a Twitch stream of the dead was a stretch.
That's why we were all laughing, Shaun. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, that's a good one. But seriously, but he's always showing you what's wrong. And, there's something that I actually heard very recently from Andy Weir in an interview where he talked about the fact that he's a bit of a Pollyanna optimist. And he actually put into words what I've always felt about humanity, which is that the reason why we always react to really weird stories in the news and we go, oh my God, this world's just going in the toilet, is because we always read the bad stuff that's happening. And that's because all of the hundreds of thousands of millions of kind, good acts and people that are doing their everyday work is unremarkable. That's our default state. When we do something bad, that's what freaks us out, because we're by default good people, or we're by default at least positive, potentially hopeful people. And I feel like when you're doing a commentary about why we're bad, to flesh it out, you also should kind of go this is why we can also make it. And for me, that's why I think the remake of the Night of the Living Dead movie is the superior version, because you actually have hope at the end of that film. And I love the black and white Night of the Living Dead. But Tom Savini's remake that also got the royalties back to George, it's just so good.
I did not know that last part about the royalties. That's cool.
Yeah, that was the whole reason they made it, was because, so, and I know we're way off topic here, but basically in Night of the Living Dead, when they were originally making it, it was called Night of the Flesh Eaters, and they decided to change the name at the very last minute. So they changed out the title card, and they forgot to put the trademark next to the name. And under old copyright law, if you didn't have a TM next to it, that meant that it was not copyrighted. That means it was not trademarked, which means that anybody could then play it, remake it, and basically just take the whole thing cloth and do whatever they want to. That's why there's 150 Night of the Living Dead remakes. Anybody can make one. And that's also why every single movie that you see that's a low budget horror film, they have Night of the Living Dead playing in the background, because you don't have to pay anybody any money, because it's considered open domain, public domain. So that always really sat poorly with Romero, because he also lost the rights of the title Living Dead. He can only call it Dead. And so basically Tom Savini said, hey, what if we can get you some royalties back? If we can get that name back to you, it'll be George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, but that version will be yours. So they basically do a polish of the script. They modernize it to 1990 and they make it. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You also get Patty Tallman as Barbara, and she crushes it. Yeah. She's amazing in that movie. And Tony Todd as Ben, man. Oh, so good. So good. I love everything about that film. So
let's keep moving to Shaun, it was your turn.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Lola got me on Dawn. I could talk all night about zombies. And if this was a real, if we were at a real panel, I'd even tell you guys my Night of the Living Dead story about me being scared as a child. But we're not going to do that, because well, we'll be here for another 15 minutes just talking about that. But when we're talking about franchises, one that I tend to pick, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on this one, the first movie, everybody agrees, is perfection. People love that movie. And the 2 second films really, most people hate them. I and my wife, we love them because there's a very deep meaning in those movies that we picked up on immediately. And we feel the test of time will vindicate us when people start to realize what some of the stuff they were talking about was in there. But that would be the Matrix trilogy. And I mean, the Matrix, again, Just
Matrix,
beautiful.
best movie, one of the best movies of all time.
Right. I mean, The Matrix is a
Lola's
phenomenal
dog
movie.
agrees. Yeah.
But then you get to Reloaded, and people are like, ooh. And yes, there's some bad CGI. They relied on it too much. But there's a narrative in there that I really appreciate, because they were willing to tackle things like identity, religion, and they were able to tackle it in a way that I've always found to be incredibly fascinating. And I think that's something that a lot of people tend to shy away from. And I'm a person who kind of has a foot in both worlds. I'm a person who deeply believes in science, but I also have a very deep spiritual side. And I feel like they're not necessarily something that you have to divorce from one another. You can have both feet, and you can have a foot in both worlds. Yeah. And I feel like The Matrix represents that a lot for me. And I really like that as it develops into the second two movies. I know a lot of other people, they don't like it when basically God shows up. And that's okay. I mean, that's why we're all here. We all have different opinions, but
it's not that God shows up. It's that they felt rushed. I think part of it was The Matrix was a victim of its own success. It was such a cultural phenomenon, and in many ways kind of took cyberpunk and melded it with anime, some of the best stuff from anime, and gave us, and Western audiences had not really seen that. Mainstream audiences, we'd seen it because we'd been watching everything, but my mom hadn't seen it, right? So and so for your mainstream audience, that blew their mind. It was, and that was part of the impact of Matrix, was just the idea that we were in a simulation, right? That we weren't actually living in the real world. And so now you come back to the second movie, and the scene I always think of in the second movie where I was like, okay, we get it, was when he fights the multiple agents, like when he's, and they just keep coming, and it was like, okay, I get it. There's millions of them. We can stop now. I understand, right? And it was, and so it felt rushed. It felt like we've got to get this out. And had the Wachowski sisters been given more time, had they been given, like, because if you think about it, The Matrix didn't happen in like 2 months. That percolated in their brains for years, and had they had that time to do the second and the third piece, I think they would have been stronger stories. And a lot of, I think, like, people like me walked out of the second one and went, okay, I'm good, I don't really need to see a third one. I'm done.
I was the exact opposite.
At the time, I felt the same way, Deanna, and I remember writing about this when we reviewed the second movie. Between Matrix 1 and Matrix 2, Matrix had become such a thing that every movie had a bullet time sequence.
Right.
Every movie, every comedy movie parodied the Matrix. And so when the second Matrix movie came out, the first time they did a bullet time thing, I busted out laughing.
Yeah, because it had been 4 years. You'd had 4 years of people, aping bullet time.
Well, and it was also in commercials too.
Yeah,
like,
it was everywhere.
It became something that was everywhere, and I think so. I think it really was a victim of its own success.
Exactly.
And had it not, like, I still want it to be successful. I don't want it, like, please take this the right way. Had it not been as successful or as culturally impactful, I would wonder if we would have gotten a slightly different movie, and something where we wouldn't have had things that had clearly been shot for the studio as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some stuff that's in there.
A lot of times, because with the first one, that wasn't made as a big movie. It became a big movie.
Yeah,
right.
It really is a small movie. When the second and third one, because they shot them back to back,
right,
there was a lot of studio involvement as well. This has to happen, because I feel bad for anybody trying to make a sequel, because you have to not only give something new and interesting, but you've got to make it exactly the same for the people that like the first one that won't like it if it's different enough. The fact that any sequels are good is really quite amazing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, because they're just trying to dip their toe back in the well and trying to get a second bite at that apple is really all the studios want. But it's funny that Deanna brings up the fighting with the million Smiths, because that's one of the scenes that I love the most, because the whole metaphor is, of course, Smith is the dark mirror of Neo. And I always like that whole conversation of why can't Neo beat Smith? It's because he's fighting himself. And ultimately, it's basically all your dark thoughts, all the things that are bad about you, that bubble up, that manifest in anxiety and depression, and things that are inherently harmful to you if not properly dealt with. That's all the metaphor that is Neo is not dealing with what is being presented to him. He's running away from it. He's fighting it as much as possible. So as long as he fights himself, he can't win. So as soon as he accepts it, of course, it takes him 2 whole damn movies to do it. And I agree. It's a long way to stretch that metaphor. But I love the fact that when he finally accepts the fact that this is me, I am part of this problem and I can fix it by accepting it, he wins, because Smith can't fight that, because he realizes that he can't be everywhere. He can't be everything. He can't do all of this. And Smith immediately evaporates. It's a really wonderful technique that, as you said, it gets a little bogged down, but I still love them. I love those movies.
You know what, Shaun, you're like, we're all allowed to love what we love. Remember, I'm a Sequest fan, and that would be your mandatory Sequest reference of anything I'm on.
I love it.
Had to get that in.
You had to get Darwin in. You had to get Darwin in.
Yeah, had to. Love the Sequest. But I also think it's interesting because we're now like significantly out from the Matrix movies. The second Matrix movie hasn't gotten the Empire bump because Sherman mentioned Star Wars. And when Empire came out, it wasn't as well received as Star Wars because it was a little bit darker than Star Wars. Now we look back at Empire and we say that's the best one of the trilogy. Like it is the peak of that trilogy. It is perfect. You don't say that about the Matrix, and we have time. Right. And it's so, the second part of the second Matrix suffered from the same thing that Empire did. It's darker in tone. Yes, the Matrix is dark, but there's hope at the end. Neo's the chosen one. We're going to win. We're going to beat the machines. Not so much in the second one.
The third one for me is actually my favorite. Revolution's my favorite out of the 3. Which is, I tell that to people and they're like, you like that better than the Matrix? I'm like, I really kind of do. And it's honestly, it's all because of the fact that you're not focusing on Neo so much. You're focusing on all the people just trying to survive in Zion. I love the Zion War. Like, I'm just going to shut up because I can talk about Zion War.
There's a 4th Matrix coming that may make
that's this year.
The second one seem better.
It's soon.
Man, if they screw this up, okay, they did not have to come back and make a 4th Matrix. If they come back and just forgive the language, poop the bed, I'm going to be very upset, okay? I'm going to be very, very upset.
Shaun, I can't, no.
Yes, poop the bed.
Oh.
Okay, so speaking of poop in the bed, Bobby Nash. Thank you.
There we go.
Wow.
This one, the character has been part of multiple franchises. So I'm going to just pick the one here. My favorite, the best Batman movie of all time, Mask of the Phantasm.
I thought you were going Batman.
Which then spawned, there's 3 more movies as part of that series that went direct to DVD that are all good, but the 2 bookends are probably the best. Mask of the Phantasm is probably hands down the best Batman movie ever. And Return of the Joker is pretty damn good too.
Yeah.
And it's a great bookend with 2 other movies in the middle that are good that I think is fantastic, that I think with all the other Batman live action stuff gets overlooked as the movies. Because we always think of Batman the Animated Series, the show, but rarely do people talk about the movies. And I just think especially that first and last one are just fantastic.
Well, Bobby, as soon as you mentioned that, the thing that always strikes me about the Batman animated series that then, of course, became the made for, digital VHS movies is that began one of the longest runs of continual storytelling where everything counted. You're talking about Batman, you're talking about the Adventures of Superman and Batman, you're talking about the Justice League series, Justice League Unlimited, you're talking about all the animated movies, the Wonder Woman movies, all the way until Flashpoint. That all counted. Young Justice.
Yep.
It's pretty impressive. It's like when you look at the movies, it's like 25 or 30 something movies. Now, granted, they're all like 75 minutes long, but that's a lot of content. And then you have TV shows that also count into that entire run. It's a really impressive run. That, quite frankly,
because also like there were not direct like Static Shock was part of that. The Zeta Project and all these others that were just tied into it.
It was really, really good. And that ran for like, what was it? I think They finished up, I think, the last one in like 2011.
Well, and
So-
Young Justice, aren't we getting a new season of that at some point?
Right,
Yeah.
but officially
Yeah.
they wrapped that
Yeah.
up, I think, in 2011 or 2012. So
Yeah.
that's basically 20 years.
Yeah.
You know,
I
talk
know.
about Marvel and how
Yeah.
impressive the MCU is, but they're still a decade behind. Well, like 8 years behind.
Yeah.
You know, the DC animated universe.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
they've
Well,
been a long
You
time.
can also make an argument, a really strong argument, that the
Mhm.
Diniverse leads to the Arrowverse.
Sure.
Because the Arrowverse pulls more from the Diniverse than it does actually from DC canon at certain points. So, you know, you get such quality. And in fact, you could make a really strong argument that that was the template that Marvel started following. Tell the comic book stories, the good comic book stories, find a way to update them for a slightly more modern audience, introduce new characters when you need to, but use them in each other's stories. They're not standalones, right? Like, and that's what happens in that series of DC movies, because you get, you get the Justice Society showing up, you get Wonder Woman and Superman's movie and Supergirl, and like they cross pollinate each other.
Absolutely.
Because they can, right? And
those series too also gave us what are arguably definitive voices for many of those characters.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Kevin Conroy is
Mhm.
that. You
Mhm.
know,
just
Mark Hamill is the Joker. Man, who would have ever thought that when you heard Mark Hamill's gonna Luke Skywalker's gonna be the Joker? Well, that'll never work.
What?
You know. You know, but not just, I mean, those are the two biggies, but a lot of those other characters, if I read a DC comic, those are the voices that I hear in my head, because like we said, it's such a big period of time where that's who those characters were.
It really is. I mean, and you're talking about Mark Hamill, but it's funny. Mark Hamill's only the Joker when he's like regular classic Joker. As soon as his face falls off, which is much more the modern Joker, I imagine what's his name, who did Bender's voice from Futurama. Joe DiMaggio?
Yeah.
John DiMaggio. Yeah. So I imagine I imagine like the face comes off, he gets a little more crusty.
Yeah.
You know.
But I think everybody,
for me though, DiMaggio was bad at his best when he was Aquaman though. So
of course.
Yeah.
Because he was a
again,
fantastic Aquaman.
I feel like Momoa got some of his stuff from that guy's DiMaggio's portrayal of Aquaman. But we are coming in for a landing, and last up is Mr. Sherman.
Mine would be Transformers. It's the tale of a franchise that has a good initial movie, a really impactful initial movie, and then they try to reboot the franchise with people who are seriously less talented as writers and producers and everything like that. And so you end up with Michael Bay doing the Transformers, where he turns the Volkswagen Beetle into a Camaro, Bumblebee.
Come on.
That's called product placement.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, granted, that was like, you know, they were able to pay for a tenth of the budget with that Camaro, right? Like, sliding in. So you're like, hey, we'll pay you like $10 million to put our Camaro in there. Okay, you know.
Yeah, but they were far inferior, and they were really inconsistent, because in the cartoon and the movie, they traveled in spaceships. Suddenly, in the 2007 movie, they're traveling to Earth as comets. And then in the next movie, they're traveling in spaceships again. And it's like, why?
It's almost like they were embarrassed by the source material.
Yes.
That is very important. And I thought that is a very good point, Bobby. I thought, I never crystallized it until you said that. I thought we were beyond that.
Yeah.
Not just back then with the first Transformers movie, but because so many things between whenever and then had not at all been embarrassed, had embraced it all.
Yes.
Hellboy. I don't know why the Rocketeer. Those are the first things that pop into my head.
MCU. I mean, the MCU.
The MCU had already started.
Not embarrassed at all.
Well, no, Transformers was 2007. Iron Man is 2008. So it had not quite landed yet. Yeah.
But the X-Men had already been out.
Yeah, X-Men had been out. But X-Men were also embarrassed about their origins. They wouldn't wear spandex. They always had to be. No, I mean,
the leather. They made jokes about wearing leather.
I would argue that the X-Men franchise, all the way up until gosh, you're talking probably 5 or 6 movies in when they basically started doing the soft reboots.
Sure.
It is really when they started to say, okay, we can now start to take ourselves like a comic book movie. And at that point, the MCU had already been established.
Yeah.
Because people were embarrassed of, we don't want to put them in spandex and make them look, like comic book heroes. And I think every red-blooded like male on the planet is waiting one day for Hugh Jackman to come back and actually put that mask on just one damn time, right? Like we just want to see him in the mask one damn time. That's all we want. Like just give us that one stupid scene. Put it in Deadpool. We'll pay for it. Like release Deadpool, the original movie, but just have Hugh Jackman put on the mask at the end, and we will go watch it in theaters. No questions asked.
Yeah.
Like no questions asked.
Because when the MCU started, I mean, Iron Man was kind of a safe bet because even though it is a superhero character, it's a man in armor. Right. So you can play the sci-fi element up to it. But when you start going up to Thor and Captain America, that was where I started to wonder how far are they going to play into it.
Right.
Like for me, in the first Thor movie, when he starts spinning the hammer and using that as a weapon, that's when I knew, okay, this is the character I knew. Because I had this fear of from other things, it's like they're not going to play with the hammer. The hammer is just going to be
right.
They won't play
the
with
trial of the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. And so they laid into these things, and I think that helped a lot. And that was the opposite I felt when watching the Transformers. It was like he's embarrassed to be making a movie about cars that turn into robots.
Toys.
Well, and
it's based off toys. Yes, it's based off an animated TV show, but the animated TV show was made to sell the toys. So
Well, sure.
And you can even tell, like, just by the way he treated the robots in the movie, he makes the robots look so monstrous. Like, they don't look like when people say, "Oh, my favorite version of Optimus Prime is like the Bay movies." I'm like, "Oh my god, go back to the classic." I would have paid all the money in the world to see a classic version of Optimus Prime, like boxy, just looking like Optimus Prime. Sure, give him some more detail. Look at what they did with the Iron Man outfit. Iron Man is a fairly boxy, but very sleek, got some nice animated moving parts.
It still looks like Iron Man.
It still looks like Iron Man. Yeah. When you watch those Transformer Bay movies, you can't tell what metal is crunching against what metal because they're all so fragmented and segmented, and I hate that.
Yeah. The only one I saw where it didn't bug me, they did that Bumblebee movie where he's actually the bug.
Yeah, that was long after
probably the closest. That was the closest to the cartoon version.
And they actually started to make them look closer to the cartoon. They really did start to like pull it back a bit.
Over a decade late. Over a decade too late.
Sure. And to be fair, Bumblebee out of all the Transformers movies is the one that I would willingly rewatch. Hey, you know what? I want to watch a Transformers movie. I'll probably watch Bumblebee. Even though Sherman, this is something that I did back in the day, and I actually still have the Blu-ray, so I should do it again. Between Transformers 2 and Transformers 3, grab Battle Los Angeles and watch that in between them, because you know how like everybody's like invading and whatnot. That's basically, you can almost argue that that's like smaller Decepticons fighting in LA. It's almost like a weird little spin-off movie because they came out around the same time, and I totally watched that. I'm like, yeah, this totally works. I
like that movie better than any of the Bay Transformers movies.
Yeah, right. I actually like Battle Los Angeles better than the Bay Transformers movies. You're actually not wrong on that one.
Yeah.
But I actually, when I watch it, that actually is the third movie in my run through when I watch the Bay, and then part 3 is actually my fourth. Because
it's funny, the writers could have been talented enough to do something like that, but somehow they didn't. I don't know why.
They focus too much on the humans. That's the biggest problem with Transformers. Is they always focus too much on the humans. Yeah,
humans are the worst.
I like to dream of what the world would have, what our movie going would have been like had that first animated Transformers movie succeeded at the box office. And then G.I. Joe went to the theater, and
and then didn't kill Duke, and then but
he looks alive.
But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We could and probably will be here for another 2 more hours, but we
didn't even talk about Aliens.
We didn't talk about
the Alien franchise. Like, come on.
We didn't talk about Raiders. We didn't talk about
they were on my list.
The Fast and the Furious. I was prepared to argue with that.
We're on a list.
Yeah. Ooh. Oh yeah.
We didn't talk about. We didn't talk about Weekend at Bernie's.
Are there
3 movies?
I mean, But
So what, does that mean Mannequin 2 on the Move is also going to make it in there?
We didn't talk about Mannequin. The Mannequin.
Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I would say Jurassic Park.
We didn't talk about Jurassic Park. We didn't talk about the Mannequin Saga. We didn't talk about Breaking 1 or 2, Sherman. But we'll get to
why is that on Sherman, man? Like, why
is it on Sherman?
Get these Breaking like Electric Boogaloo? Like,
I just watched on Tubi, which is where I watch everything now. I watched on Tubi. I watched Breaking 2 like 3 weeks ago, and it holds up, man. But
I just think
wait.
Now should be called 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I know that's been the joke for 30
years.
years. Electric Boogaloo.
That should be banned.
Go ahead, Shaun.
Joe, it holds up compared to what?
It holds up compared to Breaking 1.
It holds that low bar it started.
Right.
It's like the bar is here. Breaking 2 is
like. Are you like Leprechaun 4, Electric 2? Like, I mean, I'm trying to figure out where you are.
Leprechaun,
Electric Boogaloo 2, yeah.
Leprechaun in the Hood is here, and then Troll 2 is down here, but Breaking 2 is up here.
Troll 2.
And Mannequin 2 is just, we don't even talk about that.
We don't even. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's go around the horn. If you are on the interwebs and would like to be found, please tell everyone where people can do that. Deanna.
I do have a teacher Twitter if you want to see me tweet about math teaching or assistive technology. But really, if you like this kind of stuff, you should come to the Rev SF Facebook page where I post memes like crazy and, generally just laugh.
It's fun stuff.
Yep.
And Lola.
You can find me on Twitter at Lola Lariscy, Lariscy. I'm on Facebook under that name, but also under my Muggle name, last name Strickland, Lola Strickland, and other places. I'm everywhere.
And Sherman.
I can be found at Nerdburger358 on Twitter, on Instagram, on Pinterest, on Twitch, on some other stuff. And I also need to apologize to Janet Simmons. I'm sorry, Janet. It's the game that keeps pointing me at you. I'm not doing that, and I'm really sorry for all the destruction I've brought in Dice Dreams.
And that's so much is going on. Like there's a whole different panel that was going on.
Yes, I feel that needs to be a panel.
Yeah, I feel like that was just for Janice and not for us.
I have questions. I have secondary questions. Like, did Charlton Heston push the red button at the end?
Yeah.
But yeah, my name is Shaun Rosado. You can find me on most social medias at Numazi. You can also find me and my wife. We do a lot of cool stuff under Pop Cycled. So you can just find us at most things, Pop Cycle Baubles. And of course, if you happen to be lucky enough to be at a convention where we're vending, you can also buy some of our cool stuff.
And Bobby.
Hi, I'm author Bobby Nash on Facebook, Bobby Nash Writes on Instagram, at Bobby Nash on Twitter, and BobbyNash.com, where you can find all of that anyway.
And all of the links to all of these things, so you didn't have to get your pencil out and scribble in your notepad while these guys were talking, which I'm sure all of you attempted to do, are going to be in the YouTube show notes afterwards. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another American Sci-Fi Classics Track quarantine panel. They will continue until morale improves. Deanna, Lola, Sherman, Shaun,
Yay.
Bobby, we are so happy that we got to spend some time with you guys. We will see you very soon.
Joe's going to push the red button.
I'm doing it.
Seriously, you need to cue that up, and at the end of every one of these, it needs to happen. You can have a clip. I will teach you how to do it. We're going to make this happen. At the end of every one, you need to have that happen.
Lola's dog approves. Thank you guys very, very much. Push the red button, Charlton. That's what we'll do at the